listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. What are two things you think should not go together? Maybe it's pineapple and pizza or denim and denim. But what about comedy and robots?
Comedy is manipulation, distraction, surprise, deception. And when machines do this, we need to understand it.
That chat with an Aussie researcher trying to make robots funny, and the surprise reason why is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, it is time for the headlines with Chris Spyrou on Friday, the 19th of December.
Hey Sash, Anthony Albanese is expected to face another day of increasing anger from the Jewish community and the families of the victims of the Bondi Beach terror attack. The Prime Minister yesterday capitulated to growing pressure to do more to combat anti-Semitism, announcing a crackdown on hate speech and religious preachers who incite violence.
Look, of course more could have always been done. Governments aren't perfect. I'm not perfect.
He's also pledged to adopt 13 recommendations set out in a report from Australia's envoy to combat anti-Semitism, including changing the working definition of the word, something that's copped criticism for conflating anti-Israeli government sentiments with anti-Semitism.
The announcement has been welcomed by Jewish groups as an important first step. Some are worried, though, it will further divide communities. The opposition, meantime, says the announcement does not go far enough. Susan Lee promising to strip citizenship from dual citizens who engage in terrorist-related activities, deny visas to any person coming from a terrorist enclave, and blocking funding to arts and research projects that support anti-Semitic activities. And it's not just the pressure from politicians that Anthony Albanese is facing. We have seen the families of victims expressing their anger at the fact Albanese has not attended any of their funerals.
Where is our Prime Minister? Where is he showing the courage? Where is he seeing the whites of the eyes of a mother and father that just buried their child?
Now, that was a mourner speaking outside the funeral of Bondi's youngest victim, Matilda, yesterday.
So far, 6 of the 15 victims have been farewelled, and we've seen political leaders from both sides in attendance, but the PM has been notably absent. Albanese has addressed this, though, saying he won't attend any of the funerals if he isn't invited.
I respect the wishes of families.
But that hasn't stopped calls from some members of the Jewish community for him to resign. A survivor's brother saying it's, quote, utterly shameful that the PM hasn't shown up to any of these funerals.
Yeah, and some are saying that despite not receiving an invitation, it'd be the right thing to do for Anthony Albanese to show up. Anyway, I think he's in between a rock and a hard place in this situation where, yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But there's no doubt there is anger and there is high emotions, and Anthony Albanese is just going to have to continue to weather those storms. And look, before we move on to today's other news, we have seen the crime scene at Bondi Beach wrap up and reopen to the public. Hundreds of mourners walked the bridge where the 2 alleged gunmen opened fire on victims on Sunday night. And a floral tribute outside Bondi Pavilion is continuing to grow meantime as people from right across Sydney and indeed around Australia and the world, they're coming down to Bondi as tourists. They are heading down there to pay their respects. While a monetary tribute to the hero of Bondi, Ahmed El Ahmed, has now reached a whopping $2.5 million on GoFundMe. That's from donations, again, right across the world. And that's as the 44-year-old dad continues to receive treatment in hospital.
7 men have been arrested in wild scenes involving heavily armed tactical officers in Sydney's southwest. Footage shows a police four-wheel drive ramming a white Hyundai carrying Victorian number plates yesterday afternoon before tactical operations officers in camouflage and armed with rifles swarmed the car at the busy intersection in Liverpool.
The 5 men were then searched, their hands zip-tied behind their backs and lined up against a wall, while a second hatchback, also with Victorian number plates, was intercepted a few streets away, and another 2 men were arrested in that ramming.
Early reporting suggests the men may have been carrying weapons and were en route to Bondi, with authorities investigating whether they were planning a violent act. Police say they have not identified any connection to the current investigation into the Bondi terror attack, and the men are assisting them with their inquiries.
Migration numbers have fallen to their lowest levels in 3 years, but are still contributing to Australia's population growth, with the country now home to, drumroll please, I don't know why we're so excited about this, 27.6 million people.
I'll tell you why we're excited about this, Sasha Barbacat. I love big numbers. And when I get to see a big number like this, you said to me off air, you said a milestone is 28 or
Yes.
30 million.
Yes.
However, this just feels big and significant to me.
Why?
I just like big numbers and I want some positivity in our headlines.
Sure. Well, new data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that net overseas migration fell to around 300,000 between 2024 and 25. That's a 29% drop compared to the year before and the lowest annual result since Anthony Albanese took office in 2022.
As to the states with the biggest drops, well, that goes to both New South Wales and Victoria, falling by 45,000 and 40,000 respectively, which is being attributed to the government's caps on international students at universities and visa changes. Now, while our migration numbers are easing, it is still driving up our overall population, accounting for 84% of our 1.6 million increase since 2022. Another big number there, Sasha Barbacat.
Yay! Now, see, these are my favourite stories, weather stories. Australia will be a tale of scorching heat and storms this weekend as we also get a sneak peek of what Christmas Day will look like around the country. New South Wales, the ACT, Victoria, South Australia and Queensland are all in line for heatwave conditions in parts today, along with an increased fire danger. But in Tasmania and the Northern Territory, locals are being told to brace for strong winds and storms.
The Bureau of Meteorology has released its Christmas Day forecast meantime, so here's what we're in for. Are you listening, Mum? My mum loves a long-range weather forecast. She really
So do I.
does.
I'm a nerd. I love weather.
If you're in New South Wales, it's looking dry and mostly sunny for much of the state, but the east coast, including Sydney, could cop showers. Queenslanders, you're being told there's a risk of showers and storms through eastern, central and northern parts of the state.
In the ACT, it'll be dry and sunny, and it's the same forecast for much of South Australia and WA. Victorians, they're the sad story for Christmas Day this year. A cooler day, max temps much lower than average, a top of just 19 degrees in Melbourne. Sad, while the Northern Territory is in line for the usual hot and stormy weather this time of year is known for.
And that is it for our headlines for 2025. If you've gotten this far, thank you. Thanks
you.
for listening and for choosing the briefing this year. We're only here because of you tuning in each and every day, so we appreciate you very, very much.
We do. This year has been massive. Lots of heavy news. Of course, we sadly finished the year with the absolute tragedy that was Bondi, and that's just going to roll on into 2026 as well. But a reminder, we saw, Charlie Kirk's assassination, the LA fires, and once again, wars in Ukraine and Gaza. We had a federal election. I can't believe we had that this year. We also had the start of another Trump presidency. There was the mushroom murder trial, Aaron Patterson.
Gosh, that kept on going, didn't it?
And we got an American Pope. But, I think here at the briefing, we like to approach news in the way that we want you to be informed of everything that's going on and everything that you need to know about. But it can be more than just the serious and the weighty stuff. I think we're a testament to that. We like to keep things a bit light and bright among all the shade. So I thought, Chris, we could wrap up the year with our favourite stories.
Great. This is me cracking my knuckles in preparation for this. I love this part of our headlines. So, this year was a big year for all things pop culture, entertainment, and ha-ha-hee-hee-ha-ha-ho. So we got a Lilo and Stitch movie, which was my favourite release of the year. A woman married a ChatGPT character. That happened in Japan. The Louvre Museum security password was reportedly the Louvre. Like that made any sense. Dolly Parton is still alive after it was circulated online that she had died. Bobby Irwin kept on taking his top off like that was normal.
And he won Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, yeah, and he
in
did
the US.
Dancing with the Stars. But more importantly, we got this moment.
I feel super connected to love. So connected to love. I think this experience has shown me you never know how much love is inside of you.
Yes, Katy Perry, world-famous pop star Katy Perry, became an astronaut this year.
That's the big story of 2025.
The biggest story of 2025.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything you just listed
Thank
off.
you.
But for me, my biggest story was becoming a mum.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that is a pretty significant thing.
Well, it's not significant for anyone else but for me. And you know what? As a journalist, as someone who works, again, in a really heavy space sometimes, having a child really did just kind of shift my focus for a little bit and kind of reminded me what's really important. So 2025 was huge for me and for all of us here at The Briefing. And I do want to shout out our team. One person who's going to get the early shout out is A man none of you would have heard of, but he is intrinsic to getting the briefing up every day.
Chris
Hello,
Spyrou. Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Mr. Matt Curry.
Yes, Matthew Curry.
Cuz we would not be here without you.
No.
You would not be getting your daily headlines without Cuz. So thank you. Our fearless leader, Claire Weaver, producers Helen Smith, Holly Mitchell, Tash Belling on the Arvo edition, Chris Marsh, and our socials team, Kurt Hughes and Jade Murray, and of course, Ms. Antoinette Latouf from the Weekend Briefing.
Yes, and speaking of weekends, this weekend our survey wraps up, ladies and gentlemen, and we need you to fill that in. I mean, we don't need you to fill it in. We'd love for you to fill it in, and I'd love for you to win $100 before Christmas.
Yeah, we did say yesterday that it was wrapping up today, but they've actually extended it for the good people of the briefing.
Very good.
Head to the show notes, fill that out. We want to know more about you and how we can bring a better briefing to 2026. And as well, while the headlines from Chris and I are wrapping up for the year, we will still be putting episodes out every single day over the Christmas break. We'll be getting headlines from the listener news team, so you'll still be getting up to date with the news. And we've got some incredible deep dives planned over the Christmas and New Year's break. So we'll be back better than ever in January. We can't wait to see you in 2026.
But in the meantime, I've got my deep dive coming up next.
Yes,
it's all about robots that are being trained by an Aussie researcher to learn comedy. And the reason why is actually not that bad. You know what? I'm not that alarmed about it. Or am I? Stick around and find out in the deep dive. When you think of world-leading Aussie research and inventions, what springs to mind? I'll give you a second, come up with a few answers, and then we can compare notes. Okay, enough of that. I had Wi-Fi, Google Maps, spray-on skin, the black box, bionic ear, and of course the Hills Hoist clothesline. Please hit me up in the comments or the DMs with any that I missed. Anyway, this was my really, really roundabout way of saying we down under, we're pretty damn good at looking into and creating things that can change the world. And there's one researcher in Melbourne who reckons he might just be able to do that by doing what no one else to date has been able to do: make robots funny. Dr Robert Walton is from the University of Melbourne, and his research project is one of 200 recently funded by the Australian Research Council. He's been granted more than $500,000 of their latest $103 million funding round, and he joins me now. Dr Robert, welcome to the briefing. Robots and comedy. What could possibly go wrong?
Is that a question?
That's a question. That's my opening question. What could go wrong?
Well, that's kind of where this whole research started. I've been working with robots for about 5 years with a swarm of robots with an interdisciplinary team. And what we found was that people like the robots the most when things do go wrong, when they glitch, when they have problems, when they bump into each other. That's when people find them the most endearing and the funniest. However, of course, that is when they are doing the opposite of what they're supposed to do. So my research is looking into whether they can actually be funny on purpose and not just when they fail. There's some research that shows that once people, you and me, have learned that the thing that they're interacting with is a robot, they then limit what they expect that entity to be able to do. They put like a kind of ceiling on how human that thing could be. And so we've got this kind of paradox that people increasingly are interested in robots and AI and kind of want them to be funny. And at the same time, we seem to have already accepted that, or kind of set a limit for robots, which means they can never actually be genuinely funny. So I'm trying to work into this paradox, which is about believability.
Now, you mentioned earlier you're working with a swarm of robots. The image that comes to mind for me is Will Smith's film I, Robot. I don't know if you've seen that one, Dr. Robert, but I'm just seeing rows and rows and rows of robots, human or androids or whatever they're called. But that's not exactly the kind of robots that you're working with, is it?
No, that's not quite right. I'm trying to avoid humanoid robots at the moment. I mean, not because I'm scared by them, but because there's a lot of research into that area. And sometimes if we focus too much on the humanness, I think we miss the fundamentals. And so I'm also not looking at individual robots. I'm looking at groups of robots. The kinds of robots that I work with at the moment are like ground vehicles, like little remote control cars that can actually carry quite big things that are human size. Now, we might move on to some humanoid robots in the research over the course of the 3 years, but at the moment, that's not the main focus. But what is the focus is that, as anyone who's ever asked Siri to tell a joke will know, they aren't very good. And that's partly because, well, really wholly because they base their understanding of what a joke is 100% from scraping every single joke that's ever been written down by a human being. Anyone knows, any human knows, that reading a joke is not the same as telling a joke. And so because all of their knowledge is based on language, they miss the fundamentals of performance, like timing, staging, physical comedy, visual humour, and this key thing, which is we call in comedy reading the room, which is about understanding how to meet your energy and what your material is to this atmosphere of the room that you're in. So that's another big gap in the research that we're trying to address.
So from the sounds of it, it's very much a focus on physical comedy. And I don't want to water down the research, but just so our listeners can fully make sense of it, is sort of what you're trying to do with the swarm of robots, almost like Herbie, almost like Bumblebee from Transformers, in that these little things can still be funny even if they don't speak. They still can get cues and know when to, for example, turn on their window wipers or open their doors or honk their horn. Is that the sort of world we're operating in?
I suppose it is to a certain extent, yeah. It's really this world where we already know that just like a wry look from people around us, or the way that a cat looks at us in a certain way.
Oh, the judgment of a Labrador, Dr. Robert, the judgment of a Labrador hits the soul.
The judgment indeed. The disdain when you're not feeding them in the right way. We all know that there's this world between us that AI and robots know absolutely nothing about. It's this atmosphere, these moments, and these little looks, the timing, like starting and stopping movement even. It's like the absolute fabric of the social reality in which we live in. That is not being studied properly in AI and robotics, and that's absolutely this fundamental reality that we're looking at. That's why it's so interesting.
Based on the headlines and the top line way that we're talking about your research project, I'd imagine there are a bunch of creatives that absolutely hate this idea of AI being trained or upskilled or learning more human cues and timing. Like, especially when it comes to comedy, there's so many things that go into the way a joke lands or the way that a joke is delivered. I mean, as someone who hosts this podcast daily, let me tell you, there are many a times my jokes don't land. And for a number of reasons, there's nervousness, there's timing pressures, there's all these different human emotions that go into comedy. I guess if you train these robots in a way that they don't have those barriers, could we be training the perfect comedians down the line? Could we be creating the perfect comedian that never tanks, that never flops, that can read a room based on analytics and all these other factors?
I don't think comedians need to worry too much about the chances of us getting anywhere near a human professional comedian. But even trying is going to create interesting results. The thing is, we know that comedy is already, let's say, unevenly distributed across society. And so not everyone's very funny. Not everyone can do stand-up, and only a small percentage of humans are actually genuinely brilliant stand-ups. And the final thing to say is that comedy itself is deemed the kind of hardest and most interesting part that makes us human. And so if a computer gets anywhere near it, I'd be very surprised. But I would say we're not going for this trying to replace like Ricky Gervais or whoever your favorite comedian is. What we're doing is we're trying to understand how to make everyday situations a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more natural when we're interacting with these systems that we have. There's a lot of people around the world, for example, studying how robots and AI can feature in health and well-being, potentially with older people. And so if these systems can kind of read the situation and just intervene in the right way, maybe using humour. It might bring some more dignity, or it might bring some more humanity into that situation that just lightens what might be difficult moments in people's lives.
I like this line from the project summary. It says, the outcomes will enhance Australia's research capacity in creative technology, improve understanding of how machines use humour and manipulation in everyday life. Now, we've spoken about the positives and how it could be positive. Manipulation, typically not a word we associate with positivity. Can you unpack that a little bit further?
Well, comedy is manipulation. Distraction, surprise, deception. And when machines do this, we need to understand it. In many ways, this ship has sailed. We are already in a world where AI is creating feeds for people through social media that is really providing people supposedly with what they want before they know what they want, and using this technique to put material in front of them that creates anger and rage and creates more clicks. So we're already living in a world where AI is able to read people's emotions and prompt particular behaviours in very manipulative and coercive ways, which we're only just starting to understand the consequences of. There's also, of course, a huge amount of comedy, or you could say there's also the kind of whole world of cutie things and like dancing cats and the like. But comedy is absolutely part of the fabric of this ecosystem that we're in, and we need to understand it a lot more.
Do you have any fears that your research, it is being described as almost like a world first major study. Do you have any fears that your research could be misused?
Every time you work with technology, this is my fundamental fear. I don't know if you've seen that great Black Mirror episode with the robot dogs with Maxine Peake. It's like a slasher movie made with the robot dog as the murderer. Once they've been set on their mission, they are in this kind of psychotic mode and they can't deviate from what their plan is. It's a terrifying proposition. And all of AI research and all of robots research and lots of, the people who invented the infinite scroll, for example, weren't thinking that this is going to destroy lots of people's lives and change the world. And so I think it's important to engage critically and ethically in this field. And for a whole range of different kinds of researchers, we need a whole range of people to be working and stepping into this difficult and complicated terrain, because we need ethical guidelines and because we need to understand things from a more holistic point of view. I'm trying to gain a different perspective, and that means working as teams a lot of the time. It's not just about me in this research. It's about a much wider team and a wider national conversation and an international conversation.
Well, here's to seeing more Herbies and companion dogs and not Terminator dogs out there. Fingers crossed that's what comes out of all of this.
Yeah, keep your fingers crossed.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be here.
That was Dr Robert Walton from the University of Melbourne speaking with me there. And if you made it all the way to the end of this chat and you are still scratching your head wondering just how funny AI is at the moment, let's give it a little whirl.
Knock, knock, Chris.
Who's there?
Robot.
Robot who?
Robot down the stream.
You know what? I give credit to that one. I give credit to the human prompting behind it. Thank you to our imager, Matthew Curry, for that very, very on brand and very, very dad joke. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this chat interesting or you learnt something new or you feel passionately enough to comment about it, go do that. Go right ahead and comment. We love hearing from you guys. I'm Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.